So it's the beginning of the year, and that means that most homeowners have received their assessed value for the upcoming year. But what exactly is your assessed value, and is that the same as your market value? And to make things even more confusing, what's an appraised value? If you're confused, don't worry, so are many others. But that's why in this video, I'm going to break them all down and explain the differences between each, so stay tuned. What's going on, guys? Alex Dunbar here from the Dunbar Real Estate Group and Remax Treeland Realty based out of the Surrey Langley areas. And on this channel, I make relevant real estate content and community tours based in the Lower Mainland. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the differences between assessed, market, and appraised value. But before I get started, I'll ask that you do one thing, and that's to hit that like button so that the algorithm will share this information with more people and they can learn just like you. So diving right into it, let's first of all define each term. Starting off, we have the fair market value. This is what a buyer is willing to pay for a property on the open market. The reason why market value differs from the other values I'm going to talk about later on in this video is because there's more subjective factors that come into play. This is because in instances of selling to a friend or family, a distressed sale or a court-ordered sale could lead to a lower sale price. Or on the other side of the coin, an extremely motivated buyer might be willing to pay higher than what someone would assume was the actual market value. So one of the biggest factors that comes into play here is emotions. The reason being is that the other two values typically take out the majority of the subjective features and take more of an objective view. Moving on, let's define appraised value. This is the value determined by a licensed, certified appraiser, usually to determine the final value in a real estate transaction. Its primary purpose is to protect the banks, but also ensure that a buyer is not overpaying. A purchase appraisal is done when a home is under contract. The reason why they try to protect the banks is in the case that the buyer defaults on the mortgage, the bank will then get the property and have to resell it, so they don't want to lose money on it. So in these situations, they want to be able to reclaim at least the amount of the loan. However, in terms of the buyer, if the appraisal comes back lower than the price that they agreed to purchase the home at, the buyer will be responsible for covering that gap. For instance, if a buyer gets a property under contract for $600,000, but the appraisal comes back at $550,000, the buyer will be responsible to cover that $50,000 difference in cash. Another instance where appraisals are required is when someone is looking to refinance their property. Additionally, they're often required when a pre-sale condo is actually complete. In regards to the refinancing process, let's say hypothetically somebody purchased a home for $400,000. Now over the next few years, partially through sweat equity and doing renovations, as well as the market appreciating, the home has substantially increased in value. Because of this, the homeowner has built equity not only through paying down the mortgage, but through price appreciation and, as I mentioned, the sweat equity. So if the appraisal for that property comes back at $500,000, that homeowner now has an additional $100,000 in equity on top of whatever they've already paid down on the mortgage. This is an extremely important concept to understand, especially as an investor or someone who's going to pull equity out of their house. One thing to keep in mind here is that an actual appraiser is physically coming to the property, taking a walk through it, and doing a very thorough analysis. You'll see why this is important when we get to assessed value, but just keep it in mind. This is one of the primary reasons why we have a subject of financing in most contracts. Because if the property doesn't appraise to the same value that the buyer has agreed to pay for it, and they don't have the difference in cash, they're still liable for following through with that contract, and they could potentially lose their deposit. So this is one of the dangers when making a subject-free offer, and you should always make sure that you have a little bit of a buffer, because this is about the last situation you want to get yourself into. The cost of an appraisal is typically between $350 and $500, dependent on if you add in rental considerations. Sometimes this may be covered by your lender, but often it's not. The appraiser is going to measure the entire home, walk it inside and out, and analyze it against the comparable properties in the neighborhood. They're held extremely accountable by the bank, so they go into extensive detail. Moving on, let's look at assessed value. This is the dollar value assigned to a property to measure applicable taxes. This calculation is carried out by the local government. It is then multiplied by the local tax rate in order to determine your property taxes for the year. A common myth that I want to dispel right away is that your assessed value is equal to your market value. And more often than not, this couldn't be farther from the truth. Homes are sold for more or less than their assessed value all the time, but this doesn't mean that they're priced incorrectly. The The assessment is the value of the property determined for the government entity where the property is located. Most of these valuations are done on a mass scale, averaging values of entire neighborhoods and communities. It's often based on inaccurate tax record data which may not take into account the renovations or condition of the home. Additionally, there's a few more things that you need to know about. First of all, this is a value taken from July 1st of the previous year. This means that at very minimum, your assessed value was taken at least 6 months ago. And if you follow the real estate market at all, especially in the larger cities, you know prices can be changing on a weekly basis. Next, the assessed value is typically calculated using general characteristics such as age, location, home size, and lot size. Using this information, they then base it off of comparable sales in the area in order to come up with that value. Now, while they do state that they gather certain information from things such as real estate listings and other websites, it's not always accurate or updated. Additionally, more often than not, they don't actually go and do a physical appraisal at the house. And although they do state that they take into account subjective features such as views, from my experience and while speaking with others, it seems that more often than not they don't. So once again, I just want to reinforce that your assessed value plays a significant role in determining how much tax you pay, but isn't really attached to the actual value of your home. The best way to get a current, accurate valuation of your home would be to bring in a professional such as myself to give you a comparative market analysis based on current market conditions and recent comparable sales. Again, keep in mind, sometimes this can be changing on a weekly basis. Another thing to note is that if you feel your assessment is wrong, you can actually appeal it. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail in regards to that in this video. However, I do have a previous video going over assessments and property taxes, and you can see that right here. And that's about going to do it for today's video. So if you did get any value out of today's video, I'd appreciate it if you could smash that like button. If you are interested in seeing more real estate videos just like this one, I suggest you think about subscribing to my channel and hit the bell so you're notified when my next video comes out. I will remind you that I am a residential real estate agent based out of the Lower Mainland, so if you are thinking about buying, selling, or investing, don't hesitate to reach out and I'd be happy to help. If you're interested in learning more about what your home's worth in today's market, scroll down, hit the first link, and book a call with me at a time that works best for you. Thanks so much for watching today, and I'll see you in the next video.